Okay, it's nice to see so many people here. Thank you all very much for coming to my talk. It's very difficult to follow that amazing talk from Nicholas from Spotify. I've got like a geek crush on Spotify right now, so I am going to probably try and refer to some of the things that they do during my talk. So this is a talk called What is DevOps and How Can It Help My Business Succeed? My name's Paul Stack. I'm an infrastructure engineer for a company in the US called OpenTable. We have a shiny new logo. We're like in the middle of a rebrand, which is quite a weird project. I'm a reformed ASP.NET and C# developer. Hands up the C# developers. You will learn soon. You will learn. There are other languages out there. Don't worry. Take a little deep breath and think in what's there. I am a DevOps extremist. I absolutely love DevOps. I read every single book under the sun on what DevOps is and flow and understanding how systems work. And I am a conference junkie. I haven't been home for a weekend in maybe 7 or 8 weeks. I continually travel, but it's really good fun and I get to meet lots of interesting people. I actually wanted to call this talk how empathy is the key to making great products, because as I start to understand DevOps more and more, I start to realize that being harmonious as a team and being part of the same team makes you a very successful business. But that sounds really flowery, so we went back to the original title. Contrary to popular belief, I do write code and I am not a sysadmin. For the people that I know in the audience who tell me that I'm a sysadmin and I don't write any code, I actually do. I have an amazing team around me that write better code than I do. So they sometimes don't let me do anything just because they're very good. So we're going to spend a few, maybe 10 minutes talking about the history of DevOps and where it came from. Now, this is what we would class as the modern history of DevOps and the term DevOps. The practices were, for the people that actually know DevOps quite well, the practices are dating back to the 80s when a guy called William Edwards Deming actually released his book called Out of the Crisis. It talks about the 14 points for management. And it was all about how management needed to change and reform in order to make them better. So 2007, okay, little country called Belgium. Any Belgians in? No, great. Excellent. They're all drinking beer and eating chocolate, right? Okay, so country Belgium, guy called Patrick Dubois. Patrick is one of these types of people who, his goal is to learn IT from all sides of the industry, okay? He's been through dev, QA, ops, management, et cetera, okay? But back in 2007, Patrick actually took on a project for the government for a data center migration. Anybody been involved in a data center migration? They suck, really, okay? Having to coordinate so many different things makes it very difficult for a project to flow very easily. Now, Patrick was the middleman between the development team and the operations team, and he continually faced problems on either side. So, quick show of hands, who's developers? Who classes themselves as operations? Oh, there's 3 of us. Yes. It just shows the fact that more and more people are starting to, we see this in all parts of our business, okay? Operations and developers go head to head. Developers and product management go head to head. No one likes business owners. And then you've got marketing who make decisions that nobody knows and nobody cares about until it affects them. So DevOps is a way of trying to bring all these teams together. Now, Patrick knew there had to be a better way. And in 2008, at the Agile conference in Canada, a guy called Andrew Schaefer, whose name is Little Idea on Twitter, he now works for a company called Pivotal. And he proposed a birds of a feather session. And a birds of a feather session is an informal get-together. You just put like a post-it note on a wall and make a proposal. And if it's accepted, people just go and sit and form a little huddle and talk about stuff. And he proposed a session called Agile Infrastructure. Now, this excited Patrick because he, from his beginnings, or from his previous project in the government data center migration, he found that there was problems moving things around. So he went to the talk, and he was the only person at the talk. Now, he was actually the only person at the talk. Andrew Schaefer didn't even show up, okay? Because he took really bad feedback on his birds of a feather session and thought that it would be a complete bust. So Andrew and Patrick May, they met during the conference and they talked further. And it was, this all happened in 2008, around the time that continuous integration was becoming very, very popular, okay? So 2006, Martin Fowler writes the seminal blog post on continuous integration. 2007, it's adopted by some key companies, ThoughtWorks and so on. 2008 becomes a lot more mainstream. Bigger companies, more agile companies are starting to embrace continuous integration. And that was on the development side. So the operations guys were like, we can do better. We must be able to take advantage of some of these practices as well. So Andrew and Patrick founded what was then called the Agile System Admins Google Group. Really catchy name. And it was just a place for agile operations guys to be able to talk about what they were going to do better. Skip forward another year. Velocity Conference 2009. And it was, Velocity is a conference for web operations and web performance and operations, okay? And you had a talk called 10 deploys a day, DevOps at Flickr. Now this is an extremely famous talk, really, really famous talk. And it was by John Allspaw, who's currently now at Etsy, who spoke on behalf of operations, and Paul Hammond, who's currently now at Slack HQ, who spoke on behalf of development. And they talked about releasing their code into production 10 times a day. Unheard of, absolutely unheard of. Who in 2009 was deploying their code 10 times a day? Here, anyone? I think you're lying. No, I know you're not lying actually. You're a pirate. Who deploys their code 10 times a day now? Still very few of us, right? So you go back 5 years, 6 years, this was really unheard of as a practice. And the conference was live streamed, and of course, Patrick Dubois was watching the conference. Now they decided they were talking about it on Twitter, and they had a joke about it, and they were like, hey, you know what? Him and a guy called Paul Nazrat, who's a site reliability engineer at Google, actually had a conversation. They said, let's bring Velocity to Europe. Let's hold one of these conferences in Europe. So they did. They held a conference in Europe on the 30th and 31st of October 2009 in Ghent in Belgium. Okay, the conference was for developers and system administrators or operations for 2 days. So it was called DevOps Days. Now, very catchy name? Not really. It just described exactly the intent of the conference. Okay. Now, Twitter is quite... Space, when you're tweeting somebody, is a real premium, okay? So you want to drop as many characters off a hashtag as you want. Who performs hashtag craziness, hashtags everything? There's a few people, okay? And they decided that to save some space, they dropped the days, and they just kept the hashtag DevOps. And that is actually the history of where the actual official term DevOps came from. But this continued on for years and years and years afterwards, okay? Now, once the event was over, they wanted to hold more events. And they did. This is all the DevOps Days events that there have been since 2009. Gothenburg is in there. It actually had one 2 years ago. Bring it back to Sweden. I wasn't at it. I need another excuse to come to Sweden again. It's a fun place. And the thing about DevOps Days is it's open for anyone to make a proposal. Okay, you can go to the GitHub site, you can clone their repo, or you can send them a pull request and actually set up a local event in your city. It's been everywhere now. And there's some really cool places there. So you've had Bangalore, India, Barcelona, Vancouver, Portland, Tel Aviv, Nairobi. There's loads of amazing places you can go to DevOps Days. And it's all open style events, okay? It's all worth talking about. Slide left intentionally blank. Now, the tooling, since DevOps Days came together, it was a chance for people to share their experiences and share their frustrations at very substandard tooling. And since 2009, lots of new tools have arrived. Graphite, Jenkins, Sensu, Vagrant, Logstash, Chef, Puppet, Terraform, Grafana, thank you, Torkel. And these are tools that give us much better ways of working. Okay, much, much better ways of working. And not only that, it gives us a new process in order to automate the things that used to be more difficult. Anybody use any of these tools? More than I'd expect. Very good, very good. And what this actually showed is that momentum was building, okay? The DevOps was all about a movement that created momentum in order to make things better. And in 2011, a company called Gartner, which is an IT research firm, actually said by 2015, DevOps will evolve from a niche strategy employed by large cloud providers into a mainstream strategy employed by 20% of global 2,000 companies. So it's 2014. I'm doing my second conference in a week speaking about DevOps. Hands up in here who actually employs DevOps practices in their company. Some are like, I don't know. So by the end of this talk, I'm hoping that you realize that you may actually be, and you haven't even recognized it yet. It's about culture, okay? It's about culture and processes. So it escalated very quickly. And to sum up the history lesson, what it was actually described as is that DevOps is a huge umbrella term. Okay? Now, it denotes anything that helps the collaboration and collection and communication between developers and operations and business and QA and all the parts of your business. Okay? It was created from practitioners for practitioners from practitioners. So it's because of people like us in the industry getting together and sharing ideas on days like this and understanding that, oh, I would like to do something really cool like that. Okay? From the last talk, there's like 5 new things that I'm going to take back to my company and from what Spotify do, and I will actually try and implement some of those. That's what these knowledge sharing days are all about. It's not a thing, it's not a product, and it's not a job title. It's a movement based on sharing experiences, and it's very much open to all. Just because you work in X technology doesn't mean you can't bring DevOps practices, unless you're using VB. VB people are banned. I'm just kidding. So, I'm a coding rock star, hipster. Why do I care about DevOps? Okay? I include the word empathy in my talk, as empathy seems to be everything to do with DevOps right now. If you hate your sysadmins, and your sysadmins stop you releasing your code into production, you need to be a little bit more empathetic as a team. If you hate your product people because you think that they're making the wrong decisions in your product, you need to communicate more in your system. It's all about getting together and being more communicative. So, traditionally, the way an IT organization would work would be developers and operations of different processes, tools, and motivations. Ops want stability. Developers want to move fast. Ops are the poor guys that get woken up every night. Developers are the guys that sleep amazingly well. And a great quote to help denote the difference came from DevOps Borat. And it's confused of Dev or Ops, a simple rule: if you're praised for site success, you are a dev. If you're blamed when site goes down, you're ops. So true. In a traditional IT firm, that is so true. Okay? And I guarantee that 90% of us still work in that similar environment. Okay? 90% of the people in this room won't even know when there's a problem on their website, just because the bounds of separation of duties mean that they don't have to be concerned when there's a problem. Okay? And what happens is devs create a package, they throw it over the wall, and ops deploy it. Who still does this? Don't be ashamed. Seriously, don't be ashamed. Okay? So I do this. I used to do this. I don't write code anymore. I used to do this, okay? And it's only now since I've sat more on the operations side that I understand that this is a very bad thing to do. Now, it's not a wrong thing to do. It's just very risky. I'm writing some code, like I do, employing my design patterns and doing TDD, like you do. You don't really. And I create this package, okay? And sometimes I build it from my local machine, and sometimes I zip it up, and other times I do it through my Team City server. And ultimately, a package arrives in a location where the operations guys have to deploy it from. And then you turn around and go, hey, Mr. Ops guy, could you deploy this package? And he's like, or she, what is the package? Well, it's package 412 of our restaurant API. Okay, what does it do? And then you've got to have this conversation about what the piece of software does, what the changes it's introduced, and more than likely you'll forget some things. In fact, even if you have a conversation at all. So you're giving these guys responsibility for deploying a piece of software that they have had zero interaction with. They have absolutely no idea. You could have a loop in there that just sends garbage collection mental. Your website just completely blows up, burns down their server rack, and they have to spend weeks fixing it. You could even have a malicious person who leaves the company the next day and puts in a stupid timer script that formats the C drive. There are things that people can do. And what it leads to is this. It worked fine in dev. It's an ops problem now. And this is very true. And in Ireland, there's a television show called Father Ted, and they had this scene, careful now, down with this sort of thing. We don't want that. We don't want it to be an ops-only problem. We want it to be an entire engineering problem. So how does DevOps help this thing? There are 3 principles that underline DevOps. Okay, it's called the 3 ways. The first one is systems thinking. Second one is amplifying feedback loops. And the third one is creating a culture of experimentation and learning. Okay, these are not new to you. You will have seen these types of things before. First one, systems thinking. This is the flow of work from dev to ops, from business to customers. Okay, so let's think of it like this. An idea. Your business people have an idea. They sit down with your development team. Your development team create the product. It goes through your pipeline. Hopefully you have a pipeline. You're not deploying directly from your developer machine the whole way through to production. Operations then look after it. It's the flow of information. Okay? It's about understanding the work. Understanding the work required to do that. Now, when we start taking on a piece of work, we don't necessarily go, this piece of work is going to be 2 weeks long, and I will spend exactly 2 weeks on this piece of work, because there are other factors that influence it. And the other types of factors here are business projects, internal projects, changes, and the poisonous one called unplanned work. Okay? So unplanned work is when a bug arrives in your system, and your operations guys have to actually really study and work out what's going wrong, and they lose days. And this is what happens, and that affects our 2-week delivery that we've made with the business, the SLA we've made with the business, okay? But what the first way is about getting people together to know the plan. So you wouldn't have development on one schedule and operations on another. You would have both teams working together in order to get that flow of information through the system. Is anybody confused? Anybody care? Oh, you do? Oh, I have a couple. Oh, I like you too. Thanks. So the Continuous Delivery book, okay, by Jez Humble and Dave Farley is a great example of this. The first way. If you understand that Continuous Delivery book, you will actually understand the flow of data through your system. So as we move on. The second way. The first one was about flow of information from left to right. Now we're going from right to left. We're flowing information back. Okay, it's about operations feeding that information back to development. Hey, developer, that package you released yesterday, unfortunately that took down 14 web servers. I was up all night fixing that. How can we stop that happening from going forward? That's a flow of information. Maybe it's not the most constructive information, but it's information nonetheless. And the more you exchange that type of information, the better you will get at passing that information back. It's about providing feedback and visibility. So, another straw poll. Hands up who has access to all of their production systems so that they can see their logging, their metrics, all of that type of information. Excellent. Out of those people, keep your hands up. Out of those people who do that, hands up, hands down if you do not act on any pieces of information you find there. So, for example, you have your metric system, and you find bugs in your metric system, and you do nothing about them. Keep your hands up. Amazing. An Austrian. He's not really Austrian. He's from New Zealand. And so these metrics and visibility are great because you get to know what's going on around you. And because you can get to know what's going around you, you can fix things faster, much faster. Now, we talked about the types of work. If you take metrics on those types of work, you can understand impacts to project delivery as well. Metrics are not just number of clicks on a website, number of errors that's happened on your web server. Metrics is about when someone arrives on your website until someone leaves your website, the flow of information through there. It's about understanding if you change a button from red to yellow, the impact what that's going to have on your system. Metrics are everywhere. We should collect as many metrics as we can. There's no good collecting the metrics if we don't use them. If data is not seen, what can you do with that data? Any data scientists here? It's not a real, no, it is a real thing. Data scientists love this type of data. They love to ingest this type of information and provide visualizations and metrics on what could happen if the Earth stopped spinning, for example. They love being able to forecast all these different events. Now, devs need feedback of issues. You can't get better at what you do unless you get feedback. So, if you have a post-mortem on a website outage, developers should be involved in that post-mortem. It's simple. You need to understand, in order to develop better software, what has gone wrong with your software in production. Is it a case of you've made assumptions about the operating system that are not correct? Is it that the level of resources on the box is not enough? You need to be able to be informed of what the problem is. Okay? The outcome of this flow of information from left to right and backwards, will mean that more work gets done and the number of unplanned tickets drops. I guarantee. Talking about feedback, Patrick Lightbody from BrowserMob actually said, we found that when we woke developers up at 2 a.m., defects got fixed faster. Does anybody get paged? So I was paged at 3 a.m. this morning. Not because I broke some software, of course. And I was actually really afraid that I would wake up the entire floor in the hotel, because this is the page that went off. And I'm actually going to play this so that you can hear it. Custom signs. Okay, now 3 a.m., I had absolutely no idea what was going on. Absolutely no clue. And after a few beers, it made even less sense. But I was still woken up nonetheless, and I was able to work out that there was an issue, or work with my American colleagues and see that there was an issue. I was of no use. But the fact that I was able to get that feedback meant that when I woke up first thing this morning, I was able to check in on the system and make sure that it was working as expected. The defect was fixed at 3:30, not by me, but by somebody actually found some data and some graphs that we were collecting to show what the problem was. And it's all about that flow of information back. Sleep is very important. 2 or 3 hours sleep a night is great. Some people like 15 or 16 hours sleep a day. We all like sleep in some shape or form. So we don't want to be woken up from our sleep. Etsy, who are an awesome company, actually, they pull metrics on how many times their operations staff get woken up throughout the night. And they actually graph that data, and they can relate that back to deployment and data center problems and stuff like that, so that they can try and prevent that from happening. That's amazing. That's a collection of data that nobody thought was going to be possible. So then we go on to the third way. You've mastered the flow of information both ways in your system. Developers know everything that there is to know about the system. Operations know everything that there is to know about the code. It's never going to happen. We don't care. But we have a mutual understanding that we'll be open and honest with each other. Because that's what the first two ways are about. And then you have the third way. When you've achieved that real open flow and trust of information, you can really start to experiment. You can start to do all sorts. Okay? For example, we can inject new pieces of functionality into our website faster. Try them out. Have feature toggles, canary release, blue-green deployment. We can work out conversion metrics. We can work out, as I said earlier, what happens when I change the button from green to yellow. What happens if I remove the header when I'm making a booking of some type. Okay? And because we have the metrics in place and because we have the trust, we know that what we're trying to do is trying to achieve something amazing for the business. The real understanding the first two ways is knowing you will fail. We all make mistakes in what we do. Every single day, things will go wrong. I stupidly made a post on Facebook on Wednesday saying, I've had the most productive day today. Thursday, I put a Facebook message up saying, I've had the shittest day today. That's what happens. It will always catch us out. When we think that we're going really well and things are great, boom, something will just happen. We have to be prepared for that. And the understanding of the first two ways, and even the third way, is being able to change faster, be able to react to things better. When we can innovate in a controlled manner and understand how that works, the impact for our customers is endless. Okay? So, customer goes on our user voice site and says, hey, it would be really good if you could do such and such. I can deliver that code very fast, and I know I have a very good deployment pipeline, and I have metrics to support that. Let's try that out and see if that's really good for our business. Boom. You can measure your ROI, you can see the cost for the business, or you can go, that's a really bad idea, let's turn that feature straight back off. That's what it's about. It's about reacting very fast and providing the best things that you can for your customer. We have to test our business hypothesis. Who are these people that are sitting in these boardrooms saying, here's these 5 great strategic ideas for the year? You could implement them and you could not make a single penny extra. But if we have these types of hypothesis testing in place, then we can. The book around this is called The Phoenix Project. Anyone read it? A couple of very exemplary people at the front. If you haven't read it, please try and read it, okay? It's extremely useful. It actually is a rewrite of a book from the 80s called The Goal by Dr. Ilya Goldratt. And it's actually been changed from a manufacturing process plant into modern day IT. Okay, it's extremely good, and it actually will, I took a copy of that book and I gave it to our CEO and he loved it. Okay? I was either A, going to be told that he loved it, or B, going to get sacked. It's one of those types of books. Read it. I guarantee it's good. Now, these people get it. Okay, Etsy, Netflix, Facebook, Amazon. Facebook are running, actually, I'll start with Etsy. Etsy are running something stupid like 1,000 A/B tests a day on their website. Okay, Facebook, no two people in this room will see exactly the same features on Facebook because they're fine-tuning it to you always. And Facebook have a stupid metric like the first feature, the first time a feature gets released on their system, it's to 11% of the female population of New Zealand. That is actually a real thing. I'm not even making that. That's a real thing. I was at their offices and they showed us all their systems because we've got a relationship. And they get it. And I had to, after the last talk, Spotify get it. It sounds as though they're really trying to move in the awesome directions that the rest of these companies are. They do get it too. As I told you, geek crush. So what is DevOps? It's not this. It's not that. Just because we can automate things, it's fine. I can show you and go, come on. Where have you gone? Yay. Okay. So I can go to our Puppet repo. I can't type and talk. I can't multitask. I'm awful. You see that now? So shell shock vulnerability in Bash the other day. We had to patch our web servers, and we run Puppet exclusively as well. And all we had to do was go to this line of code and go, hey, change it from 4 to 5, commit it to the repo, and it rolled out. Right, nothing spectacular. That could have gone wrong. I have done that so many times, it's gone wrong. I was given a demo in Kansas in May, and I actually added a user to our system. This is so bad. And I pushed it out into production without actually testing it. Yeah, I broke loads of servers, loads of web servers. And it's true, you can push things out really fast, but at the same time, you can break things very fast as well. Okay, you can force OpenSSL packages this way as well. They seem to be changing like 3 or 4 times a day at the minute. Anyway. So it's not all about automation. It's not all about rolling stuff out that way. It's also not this. Thank you, Greg. We had a production problem yesterday, and everyone was like, what are you going to do about it? And I finished my beer and closed my laptop. It's not that either. I had to put these 2 things in because they really appealed. I was in a rush and I was leaving for dinner, and I like dinner. DevOps is not a job or a title, okay? This is really important. It's an open role, but it's definitely not a job. Would you ever hire an agile? No. Would you ever hire a lean? No. It's a term, it's a philosophy, it's a way of thinking, okay? Oh. It's definitely not developers just getting production access. That is a car crash. I'm not saying that you can't trust developers. You can't trust anybody with production access. We all like to go and tinker and run this little command. Ooh, I found this command today. What will this do? Okay. It's not an exclusive members club, except if you're in VB, as we've discussed. DevOps is about culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. Are there any VB developers here? Okay, there we go. There's one. There's actually one. I didn't actually mean to pick out VB developers. I could have said PHP just as easily, or SharePoint. Are there any SharePoint developers in here? Whoa, yeah. I'm glad I didn't exclude you. So, as we go down, things get less important. The further up that list you are, the more important it is, okay? Culture in DevOps is everything. People and processes over tools. I can't stress that enough. If you don't have the culture, any automation you do will be of no use. You just won't use it. You'll find ways to bypass it. You'll probably never maintain it, and it'll just fall to the wayside at some point. After you've got a great culture, you can put the automation in place. When you start to put the automation in place, this is where you can actually stitch together the fabric of delivering your systems. Tools for release management, provisioning, configuration management, systems integration, monitoring, control, orchestration, they're all part of being in a really important DevOps fabric. Okay? We are starting to, at OpenTable, we're using a lot of these tools. We're nowhere near a finished article. We're very much starting towards being better at what we do. But every day we have to try and improve. And we can only improve if we measure things. If you can't measure, you can't improve. I went to the CEO, or the CTO, sorry, and said, hey, we can now provision provision a Windows box and fully configure it for an application server in 6 minutes. He was like, great. Tell me when it's 3. Because we could measure it, he was continually trying to force us to get better. A successful DevOps implementation will measure everything as often as you can: performance metrics, process metrics, people metrics. And I'm not saying how many lines of code a person writes in a day. That's a rubbish metric. It's along the lines of how many times in the evening is someone being woken up because their system is substandard. That's something you can improve on. It's very important. People are more important than anything else in this type of environment and culture. And sharing. Creating a culture where people can share openly and in a trustful environment will make them share. If you have no trust within your team, there's not a chance in hell your team members will tell you about a problem that they faced. or they won't tell you of a bug that they found because they're really worried about what people will think about them in the team. Whereas if you sit and you openly discuss it and have blameless postmortems, then you'll actually face things together as a team. An interesting motivation in DevOps is the way that sharing DevOps success stories actually helps other companies. This is actually why I like to preach about it, right? Because we're doing so much better from where we were a year ago, and I'm actually writing a chapter of a book about this, to where we are now. And this time next year, I don't even know where we're going to be. We're going to be able to do things faster at the click of a button, and even from my phone. And we're actually heading towards there right now. It attracts talent. If you have really interesting tools that take away the friction from delivering systems, you will find great developers. It's as simple as that. People like to go and work in an environment where they can get on with what they're paid to do. Hands up who would love to go and work in an environment that has legacy code rubbish and only deploys their software once a year. And if you put your hand up, we were having talking later. You write VB, so I know that's the case. I didn't want to pick on the SharePoint developers. I know there's a lot of SharePoint developers here, but yes, you're right. Any SharePoint developer. But then the next thing is that you actually, by having these DevOps success stories, you can actually create great open source software that other people can use. Netflix do this. Spotify have released a whole ton of Puppet infrastructure that I actually use. We are providing open source Windows infrastructure for Puppet that other companies use. It's all about sharing and making each other better at what we do, right? So we have to remember we're all part of the same team. It's not us and them, it's we. And that sounds like a real cliche, but if we don't knock down those barriers between teams in a company, we can't be great at what we do. The company will only be able to go so far, and as large as the company gets, influences like Conway's Law will start to be introduced, and you'll start to create real hierarchical software that gets like spaghetti mess, and you won't be able to provide feedback on it. This is really important to remember. Metrics and automation are really key as well, really key. And I wanted to actually show you some of the metric systems that we have at OpenTable. Stupid mirror displays. So we use Grafana. I seriously can't thank Torkel enough for Grafana. Does anybody use Grafana? Okay, one person. Seriously? I'm not even angry. I'm not even angry. So we over the past few days, and this actually included last night, we found that the error that I was woken up for last night was that we had a real metrics queue, okay? So we have an Elasticsearch cluster with log stash, and we have all sorts of feeders through it, and we have collectors in our virtual private clouds in AWS, and all of these systems feed into a central metric system, okay? Now, 2 days ago, we started actually seeing that we had a huge buildup of logs in the system. So we have 6 machines that collect these, and they can store about 3 million logs each. We had a backlog of about 18 million logs in the system, and we had no idea why. Without collecting that data, there's no way in hell I would have found out just the magnitude of the problem. Impossible. So we worked out what the issue was, and we fixed it. Okay? And then the next day, we found that there was the problem, the bottleneck moved from this place to this place. Then we went back and did some more research, and we found out where there was another bug. And then last night, we found that it spiked again, just after midnight. And we actually found out that it was a problem in our router between our data centers. It was going to 100% CPU, and the packet loss was going through the roof. But without collecting that type of information, that type of data, there's no way I would have been able to work out where the problem was. Well, there's no way that our amazing team would have been able to work out where the problem was. I didn't work it out. I had no clue. So it's really important to collect as many metrics as you can. And Grafana is a lovely, simple web UI that sits across the top of Graphite that you can start to do amazing things with. Think of Graphite as this huge bucket that you can throw metrics into and subclass the metrics, and then you can get Grafana to create really nice, simple displays across the top. This is a production dashboard. We have exactly the same dashboard in QA. It'll take like 5 minutes to load it. I'm VPN'd in their machine in San Francisco at the minute, and it's just not going to work. We have exactly the same dashboards in QA. We want to put those metrics in front of people early so that they understand where the problems lie. Here's another set of them. I mentioned that we have an Elasticsearch cluster. We want to know the characteristics of Elasticsearch. We want to know the search rate per second. We want to know the indexing rate per second. We want to know the CPU. We want to know the JVM percentage heap used. We want to understand the characteristics of Elasticsearch because we want to be able to react if there's a problem. If we don't have access to the metrics, we can't work out where there are issues. And there are always issues. CPU, or disk size, is just about to fall through the roof in some of the machines. We found out that we didn't actually have a Nagios alert on the partition for that disk. Yesterday we added some partitions. We got like 5 warnings within 5 minutes saying, hey, your disk usage is dropping really low. Collect metrics, folks. That's the key, okay? Another set, reservation data. This is a QA system. I obviously can't show you production because it's quite sensitive data. It's tied to revenue. But we have got reservations in our QA system. When people go through and the automated tests make reservations, we run restaurant reservation software, we can start to see trends of what happens at certain pieces. Split down by partner, split down not only by partner, but also by region. So I'm not connected at the minute. Stupid VPN. La la la, please wait. Your call is important to me. So you put these metric systems in front of people earlier and they can start to see what's happening. Okay. So that's some of the many things that we do with Grafana. Okay. That's like, it doesn't show you, it doesn't have a scrolling window. That's a bug I should raise. It does? Okay. Okay, so there you go, I'm learning new things. Lead speak for the win. It is a really old version. It's like 1.5 in QA at the minute, so 1.52 I think. So we put these metric systems in front of people early, and then they understand what's happening. Okay. Another one is on top of Logstash and Elasticsearch. We have got, this is one of the team's dashboards in QA right now. And in the past hour in QA, the request for their web service has taken like 13,000, right, which is very low. It's only a small amount. This isn't a QA system. But they can measure the total requests, cache misses against Redis, average response times, non-200 responses, user agents, average load, all their different URIs so they understand the different pieces of the system that are being hit. So if they go, hey, version 4 of the API is no longer being hit, we can deprecate that now because we have the metrics to show that no one is hitting that API anymore. This is off the back of Elasticsearch that uses Kibana. We have exactly the same graph in production. It takes a lot more traffic, but we can start to see trends. Different times every day, we can see trends. In fact, I can go and show you. Come on. Come. If it lets it load. Come on. Come on. So you can see at different times, the cache peak, if I go back like 7 days, which loads like 500 or 600 million logs, at every 2 hours we can see a cache hit. Okay, we can see that the request goes through the roof because one of our partners is hitting us really hard. so we can, and we can go to that partner and say, hey, you know, every hour you're making lots of requests to our system when you could spread them out. It's about metrics. Another one, we can understand all the different log types in the system. Every log type, every API is making is logged and has a type. So we can go to a team and say, you're making ridiculous logs. You're logging when a method is hit and when a method is exited. Why don't you do it a little bit better and say, the request for this method took 3 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds so that we can start to improve on that rather than just collecting data. Not only that, we can take the data from our metric system. So Nicholas said one thing that Spotify can't do is they can't trace a request going through the system. We've just put this in as a beta feature in our internal system right now. And I have a GUID right here. Everyone loves GUIDs, right, SharePoint developers? So you take that GUID, and that GUID relates to a request that came in through our front door service, the access point service that Spotify have as an example. Okay, and you search on it, it goes, if it works, come on. Oh, it did work. And we know every single piece of the puzzle that request ID has touched. Okay, it's touched the user service, it's touched the start page tabs, and then you can actually go and you can click on it, and it starts to give you what URL it's hitting, the duration that it took, the status, the runtime version, the OS, the request. Every piece of information is requested there. It's held so that we can actually display that back to the people. Metrics are key. Key. We can go to our HIP chat room. Anyone run Hubot? A few people? Okay. So we have Hubot hooked up to Elasticsearch. And we can say, Elasticsearch, cluster health, logging prod. And it goes off and it brings back data from the Elasticsearch cluster. I don't want to have to go to a UI. I want to do it on my phone when I get an alert. Is there a problem? Is the cluster green? Or you can go Elasticsearch, cat nodes, logging prod. And this gives you a whole ton of information about each and every node in the system. Okay, it's JVM usage, how much disk space is there, it's percentage CPU usage right now. Every one of the Elasticsearch nodes in our cluster is returning right here. I don't want to have to go and inspect each and every individual server. We're bringing in measurement, and also we're bringing in automation. More automation. So there's a project called Rundeck. This is a QA system. It's a really secure password of admin. Really secure. Sorry, security people. Oh, he's left. He's not happy with that. Sorry. And so we have this hooked up to our Puppet infrastructure, and we can go OS family, if I can spell it, Debian. And it'll go off and give me back, it'll take a few seconds. Again, this is held in our cloud infrastructure. It'll give me all the boxes that are Debian boxes. And then you can say, hey, also roles, location, sorry. Oh, you bastard. Give me back the location API nodes, which actually should just bring back 5 or 6 nodes. Maybe 4, I can't remember. Maybe we've killed one. But by being able to take the automation and then say, oh, hey, and off the nodes, off the back of this, we go node actions, create a job, and go off and run that job on those nodes. It's an orchestration system. Okay? And the other thing we can do is we can go Tyson. This uses a tool called Foreman. I've got like 10 minutes, so if anybody wants to shout any questions while I'm doing this, please do. Awesome. Hello. I'm so sorry, excuse me. Ooh, so the question is, how does Grafana stack up against New Relic and App Dynamics, etc.? In my opinion, it's different use cases. So App Dynamics and New Relic are self-discovering of metrics. Okay, Grafana is a lovely UI that sits on top of Graphite and a Graphite style system or InfluxDB or any of these pieces of information, and you tell it what to log. Okay, or you can say, give me every JMX piece of information that I can possibly get, and then it categorizes it down, and then you can get it back in different categories. So maybe it would be very bad of me to say that. I'm not going to say it because I'll get quoted on it. But I think they're different use cases. I honestly think there's different use cases. So we were a .NET shop, and we were exclusively using App Dynamics, and it was fantastic for us. Absolutely brilliant. It provided a lovely overview across the entire of the system of how every system talked to each other. We didn't get the same thing with Grafana because that wasn't important to us. So they got different things. Make sense? You can use both, by the way. You don't have to use one or the other. You can certainly use both and be very happy using both. So I can go off and create a machine and go VPC, actually I'll call it demo leet. And we can deploy an AWS, which is a VPC, and we'll give it a pre-prod box, and we'll give it a network. And we can give it an operating system. And we want to have it as an EBS volume backed machine, but we want an M3 large. Done. Box is built. Box is actually spinning up in the background. Why have to have process in order to build boxes? Let the devs build their own boxes. Obviously put metrics in place to make sure that they're not spending money left, right, and center unnecessarily. Let them build whatever they need to build. It's just actually, this actually hooks back into our domain so that it can set some DNS names. And you'll see it's actually finished, then there you go. Demo leet, it has an IP address, it has a MAC address. You go in, you can see where it sits in AWS, and the AMI it was built off, and in like 30 seconds, I'd be able to SSH into that box. Okay. Take away the process. Make it frictionless for developers. They'll be so much happier. Right. Any other questions? Cool. Everyone obviously gets it. I am not good at multitasking, but thank you for pointing that out. Seriously, thanks. So metrics and these metrics and pieces of information help us achieve what's called situational awareness. Okay, situational awareness is the ability to identify, process, and comprehend the critical elements of information about what is happening to the team with regards to the mission. That came from the US Coast Guard. More importantly, it's knowing what shit is happening around you. Knowing when there's a problem. Rather than being reactive, you can be proactive if you have these types of metric systems. So companies who have started to think more about DevOps, this from a survey of 9,000 techies by Puppet Labs, ThoughtWorks, and IT Revolution back in March last year. I'm going to take you through 3 of the key principles, okay, of what they found. Okay, companies that have started to think more about DevOps are much more agile. Code was actually found to be delivered up to 30 times faster. Lead time for actual single line changes was 8,000 times faster. Now, where they found this, something like DevOps helps you do the following. Hands up who finds a production bug and can make a same-day deploy to fix that bug. Hands up who has a different process for a normal change going through their system, that it can take weeks. If you can do it in 1 day for a production bug, why can't you do it in 1 day for everything? Bureaucracy, I love it. I love it. DevOps. DevOps, companies who thought more about DevOps can recover faster. Okay? Netflix Simian Army. There was a bug last week discovered in the Zen hypervisor in EC2. And EC2 sent an email to all their customers saying, excuse me, we're very sorry, but we have to reboot all your EBS-backed instances. Did anybody get this email? It was painful, right? I know some people who classed it as reboot-mageddon. They were just rebooting servers left, right, and center, and it was going back on the list because it was moving from one Zen-backed hypervisor to another Zen-backed hypervisor. It became really painful. Netflix survived that problem without any single downtime because they have this suite of tools called the Simian Army. Okay, they've got Chaos Monkey, Chaos Gorilla, and Chaos Kong. And it was mentioned by Nicholas in the last talk that people actually practice with these systems. The more you practice these outages, the more you will survive these outages. Simple as that. And if you're in a DevOps style mentality where you're in an open and trustful environment, you'll be able to practice. And the last thing is that high-performing IT teams can experiment more. These are the 3 ways. It's nothing new. Mind blown. Okay? This is not new information. What we're doing is we're being faster at the code, we're being able to react better when things go wrong, and we're actually able to experiment more. What does it mean? It means great products for all your customers. Internal customers, external customers, logging systems, whatever your upstream customer is, if you employ these techniques, you will be much better at delivering those systems. I'll provide the slides, but some people to follow in this, okay, are these people, and you can see them in a little bit. So what's the future for DevOps? Okay, right now it's been about people and processes and automation tools going forward, okay? There's an event next week in Mountain View, San Francisco, in California, about DevOps for networks, software-defined networks. You create your internal network all in code so that you can test it. That would be pretty cool, right? Really cool. DevOps Enterprise Summit. Okay, this is like actually quite funny because it was a chance for some of the main people of DevOps to get what we would class as enterprise companies together and show how they were getting better at what they do. And it just completely went off the scale. So there's like 150 people speaking across 3 days. But it shows that enterprises are starting to get even interested in it as well. Gartner's prediction is becoming true. By 2015, it's going to be mainstream. Where next? Corporate IT? Storage? It's endless. There's business opportunities everywhere around DevOps. People love tools. They love tools. We all do. DevOps is dead. Long live DevOps, right? It makes us better, much, much better at what we do. So, any last questions? I have 2 minutes. Anybody want to wake up? Am I holding anybody back? You're all here for Greg's session, right? There's a question at the top. So the question is, how are we gathering the data from IIS request logs to push it into our logging system? So there's a tool called nxlog. Okay, it's an open source tool that you can configure, and it's like a little service that runs on your Windows web servers, and you tell it the location of where to put the logs to, and it'll just forward them. So it's a non-blocking process, and it's actually quite a nice little piece of software. So, and that'll do it for you. nxlog. I've got a terrible, thick Irish accent at some point, so you can find me after and I'll actually show you the piece of software. You're probably sitting there going, I have no clue what he just said. No clue. Any other last questions? Guys, thank you all very much. Please go and start having a look at some of these technologies.